This is what I think should happen to rapists. Even somebody who rapes a woman in a fur coat, if that ever happens. I think that his penis and his balls should be seared off with a cuticle remover, slowly. Then I think 2 skewers should be shoved into their eye sockets.
Yo, what up? Hopefully this video isn't too lightweight for you guys. I've made a lot of really heavy content on YouTube lately, and some people love it, some people hate it. What can I tell you? This video is really responding to 2 different strands of thought. On the one hand, a recurring theme, especially in the conversations I have with other vegans face-to-face, is of offering a sort of broad and general excuse that, well, whatever problems may exist in vegan political discourse, the fundamental value we can return to is that we need diversity. We need all kinds of different people promoting all kinds of different messages. All roads lead to Rome, and it's all positive in as much as it promotes the vegan message. Now, all right, really honestly, in our heart of hearts, is this anything more than a way of ending an awkward conversation? On my channel, I have encouraged people to go to school, stay in school, get an education, lead a meaningful life, get a meaningful job, etc. Can you really say that this message is equally as valid as other vegans encouraging people to just drop out of school immediately, to just live on permanent vacation, to just promote a career on YouTube, to travel, wander around Thailand aimlessly, etc.? Now, it's no joke. I've mentioned specific examples on my channel. I have also received email from people, and I've seen a few videos on YouTube, but I've received email from people I'm not going to name, obviously, talking about their own experience that they had a period of their lives, either in university or while they were still in high school, when they were really seduced by this, when they really felt that they should drop out of school, or they actually did drop out of school because of the guidance being given to them by leaders in the YouTube community. Now, my advice may not be great. My advice may be lousy, but it's not the same. It's not equivalent. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we can't just say in an offhand way, well, all roads lead to Rome. As long as people are promoting veganism, it doesn't matter whether their advice is to drop out of school and be a bum, or their advice is to stay in school and get an education. Now, as most of you know, watch my channel, among the most prominent people who went back to school because of my influence was this guy, the Vegan Cheetah. So he's an ex-convict. He's got a lot of problems in his life. He's been trying to improve his life and turn it around. And he really thanked me profusely and directly. Some videos I made before I'd ever talked to him, some videos I made really directly inspired him to turn his life around and go back to college. And he's getting some kind of college degree related to journalism and digital media now. And he's taken on a whole different view of his future and his career. And before that, he was directly under the influence of people like Durian Ryder and Freely in imagining himself being a rebel, being anti-establishment, and in just pursuing a life as a social media personality. Now, I can't claim I've solved any of the guy's problems. I can't even say my advice was that great. But my point is, the notion of this kind of equivalence falls apart. I'm not going to repeat here the different warnings I gave about bad nutritional advice. Obviously, we can't pretend that all nutritional advice is equally valid. We can't pretend that all promises of beauty and health, promises that you'll cure incurable diseases, are not equivalent to real science-based medical approaches to veganism. That's another asymmetry. But first and foremost, from my perspective, when you have a situation like Gary Yourofsky sitting down and freaking out on camera, sitting down and incoherently saying that people should be stabbed, murdered, raped, these kind of violent, inane breakdowns from Gary Yourofsky, who is not a teenager, who is a grown man, I don't see how anyone can look at that and honestly say, well, all roads lead to Rome. Well, as long as it's promoting veganism, it's okay and it's all equally valid.
Revolutionaries throughout history, we're all crazy. crazy enough to fight the system, to stand up in a court of law and not apologize for breaking the law, to go up against cops, judges, politicians, society in general. And if you want to say that, well, you still support violence, I've never denied that I support violence.
It's going to be in the very near future that somebody busts into a slaughterhouse or a vivisection lab with guns and they tell the slaughterhouse workers, you take those knives off those pigs' throats right now or I'm going to shoot you.
There's no way that a pro-violence message can really be equal to an anti-violence message. There's no way that a democratic, participatory approach to veganism can be equivalent to a violent and fascistic approach to veganism. And I don't use the word fascist lightly. Some of you already know this about me. I'm one of the only vegan channels to directly address the problem of neo-Nazis within veganism. Nobody else wanted to do it. Now, some of my critics who kind of fault me for very minor things, people who have their own YouTube channels, one of the things I can say back with them is, yeah, look, I may be a terrible human being, but at least I was bold enough to really take on and address the problem of neo-Nazis. And since I made that video, I know of at least 2 more channels, people who were vegan who became either neo-Nazis or crypto-Nazis, not quite as clearly committed to like Adolf Hitler, but still way out on that end of the political spectrum and involved in anti-Semitism and racism and what have you. So that's going on. There is no way we could say, oh, well, all roads lead to Rome. As long as they're promoting veganism, it's all equally valid. No, obviously, there are hard limits. Obviously, we have a real problem that I feel a guy like Gary Yourofsky brings into sharp focus with, the lunatic fringe of veganism being the most visible aspect of veganism, being in some ways the most influential aspect of veganism, and we're in danger of that being the definitive image of veganism. Certainly in Israel, Gary Yourofsky being the guy who got on television, his particular form of insanity probably has defined how millions of people think about veganism, for better and for worse. And, of course, you can point to some elements of his influence that are positive, but yes, I am really sincerely concerned about the negative aspects, and I'm even more concerned about it because just like with the issue of the actual Nazis within veganism, nobody's talking about it, and people are making these excuses and carrying on. Now, so I said way back at the beginning, 5 minutes ago, there's sort of 2 questions I want to roll into one video here. The other is something that came up very briefly in my my conversation with Zaria. You may have noticed in that conversation with Zaria, I paused and reflected. I said, look, I can remember the first vegans I saw on YouTube. And that did in some sense shape what I saw as normal or as positive or beneficial discourse in this game we play. Backtrack slightly here. Look, why do I mention this now? Why do I include it with this question of, look, all roads lead to Rome, as opposed to being really honest and reflecting on the hard limits to what is and isn't positive or acceptable within veganism as a social movement. To some extent, whenever you're criticizing something else as unacceptable or abnormal, you have some implicit notion of what normalcy is. And, I'm not such a snob. I do think, and I've said this in recent videos, I said this in conversations with Vegan Cheetah, I do think there's a role for just vacation videos. I do think there's a role for weight loss and lifestyle and this stuff. Unfortunately, currently, it's suffocating the life out of veganism. There are problems. I've discussed them at length this channel. I don't need to repeat them. But I think there's a role for comedy and silliness and for all kinds of diversity within what vegans have on YouTube. However, as I've already been saying, there are hard limits. There is nothing comedic about Gary Yourofsky sitting down on a mainstream news channel and ranting about killing people and stabbing them in the eyes and these, dark, violent fantasies he has. This is not comedy. It's not satire. It's not a positive part of veganism. And there has been a code of silence. I think the vast majority of you guys who are watching this, you who have your own YouTube channels now, you ask yourself, you look in the mirror why you never addressed it. I think it's because, on the one hand, people felt a debt of gratitude towards Gary Yourofsky, that they felt they could not criticize him because of the positive contribution he's made. And on the other hand, people are just in the reckless pursuit of fame, and they would much rather try to attach themselves to Gary Yourofsky's star, to try to ride his wave of popularity, to try to make money, basically, or raise their own profile, rather than really being honest, or rather than really dealing with the negative implications this has. Okay, so in this context, for me, it's worth reflecting on what I think is normal. Given, even in that discussion with Zaria, we were talking about, I don't really regard the beauty-centered form of veganism as normal. Now, on the one hand, that reflects my own experiences back around the year 2000, so that's now 16 years ago, when veganism just was not about diet and weight loss beauty. And sorry, people didn't even say vegan back then. People said vegetarian and animal rights, or, animal rights and ecology. Different terms. The word vegan was not that popular yet. And I think most of the people weren't vegan either, but they were somewhere on the vegetarian spectrum. And say back then, I refused to buy leather back then, and so on. I mean, it's just a different era. And I've already made videos talking about that. But look, I said to Zaria, the first YouTubers I saw, they were not presenting themselves as objects to seduce you. They weren't. Their beauty was just not the focus of the message. It wasn't important. And of course, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and so on. But one of the people who shaped my expectation, the very first person I saw talking about veganism on YouTube, was Shelly123. I'll put a link below. I think she's been forgotten now. It's more than 5 years ago. And I'm not saying her videos are brilliant. I'm not saying they influenced me. They didn't. They had no real impact on me. But that was the first time when I saw the reality of veganism being, packaged and presented and argued on behalf of on YouTube, where YouTube was the public forum for the presentation of these ideas. But I say that gave me a sense of normalcy, compared to which people like Freely never were normal. So for me, that's worth reflecting on. And the other channel I want to link to here is a young woman named Claire.
But if you cut a cow's throat, or if you take a cow's baby away from her so you can steal her milk, they do feel pain. They are sentient. So we can make such a big difference with our choices, the choices that we make every day. We can help to make this world more non-violent, more loving. We can help to erase discrimination and exploitation. So you can do that. Why don't you want to? Why don't you want to make the world a better place?
So she's now 20 years old, but she's been on YouTube for several years, and I remember seeing her videos several years ago when she was probably 17. So at age 17, she was putting up rational, rigorously argued statements on behalf of veganism, and she was uploading them both in English and in Chinese. Now, if you're really honest with yourself, if you take the time to click through the link and take a look at Claire's videos, I'm not saying they're all genius, I'm not saying they're all brilliant, but honestly, this woman at 17 was a better advocate for veganism than Gary Yourofsky ever has been.
So the point is, if we can't be perfect vegans, if we can't be perfectly non-violent all the time, we can still get really close. We can still be 95% non-violent or 99% non-violent. Why are you going to say that we can't be 100%, so I'm just going to be 0%? It doesn't make sense. And trying to be non-violent, really trying, really going vegan, really trying to do the best you can, makes such a big difference. Nature is violent, sure, but is that a good thing? Do you want to say nature is violent and just live violently everywhere? No, that's not good. We have a choice to live non-violently, and we should make that choice. We should try and live as non-violently as possible.
But if you have in your mind an excuse for Gary Yourofsky that, oh, he's a young guy, he just, he has mood swings, we should just overlook this or forgive this. No. Gary Yourofsky's conduct in having these kinds of hysterical, violent breakdowns in news interviews and just on his own YouTube channel where he can edit it. He doesn't even have to release it. Nobody's forcing him. And in the interviews he's given to Bite Size Vegan, that type of behavior, it compares badly to any mainstream politician, whether it's a local mayor or someone like Jeb Bush. And we all think Jeb Bush is an idiot. Well, if Jeb Bush is an idiot, compare Gary Yourofsky to him. How much stupider, how much less disciplined is Gary Yourofsky? Because it's very difficult to think of a mainstream politician who had these breakdowns. But really, sincerely, this young woman, Claire, can take a look at her content. She was doing better at age 17 than Gary Yourofsky was as a grown man. So again, for me, there are lessons there about what's normal. Not what's optimal, not what's excellent, but just, it is possible for people to address these issues, engage with them in a sincere, meaningful way without resorting to, making a product out of their own sexuality and without resorting to these kind of extreme violent tactics or what have you. There's just nothing inevitable about that. But the last thing I've got to say here is the same as the first thing. To make progress, even just as isolated individuals, forget the movement. To make progress just as a bunch of people who are sitting alone in front of the internet with a camera, with a blog, with whatever you've got, making any progress on this issue actually does start with admitting to ourselves, no, it's not okay. It's not the case that all roads lead to Rome. It's not the case that all messages in support of veganism are equally valid and should be equally embraced just because they support veganism. The same way that we need to have a refined critical awareness that we apply to health information, scientific claims, etc., we need to apply to political claims. And yeah, it reflects very badly on veganism. The paucity of any kind of sincere critique in response to the neo-Nazis, in response to Gary Yourofsky, in response to any of the other outlandish examples that really matter. That reflects very badly on the state of veganism today when you look at the incredibly catty, shrewish, counterproductive, self-hating infighting that goes on over matters that are completely trivial.